There are moments in life when your mind becomes louder than your reality. You start thinking too much, analyzing everything, replaying conversations, imagining outcomes that have not even happened. And slowly your heart begins to feel heavy without any real reason in front of you. And in those moments, it feels as though the way forward is completely blocked. But what you don't realize is that while your mind is busy trying to figure everything out, your Creator has already been working in ways you cannot see, quietly arranging paths, opening doors, and preparing solutions that you are not even aware of yet. There are moments in a person's life when the mind becomes louder than everything else. Not because the situation has changed, but because the thoughts inside begin to multiply. One thought leads to another. One assumption leads to a fear. One fear leads to a scenario that has not even happened. And suddenly the heart feels like it is carrying something very heavy, even though nothing has physically changed in front of you. This is the reality of overthinking. And it is something many people go through silently without even realizing how much it is affecting their peace, their decisions, and even their relationship with life itself. Overthinking often begins in very simple ways. A delay in a response, a situation that is unclear, a decision that feels uncertain, or a future that seems unknown. The mind does not like uncertainty, so it tries to fill the gaps. It starts creating explanations, possibilities, and outcomes. At first, it feels like thinking is helpful, like you are trying to understand and prepare. But slowly, that same thinking turns into something heavier. It stops being helpful and starts becoming repetitive, emotional, and draining. The mind no longer solves anything. It just circles around the same concerns again and again. What is interesting is that most of the time, overthinking does not change the situation at all. It only changes the person experiencing the situation. The problem outside remains the same, but the peace inside begins to disappear. And when peace disappears, even small things start to feel big. A simple delay feels like rejection. A quiet response feels like distance. A normal challenge feels like a disaster. Not because reality has become worse, but because the mind has started to exaggerate what it cannot control. In these moments, a person often forgets something very important. They forget that not everything in life is meant to be controlled by them. The human mind has limits, even though it tries to operate as if it has full authority over outcomes. It can plan, it can analyze, it can prepare, but it cannot guarantee results. And yet, when people overthink, they unintentionally place themselves in a position where they feel responsible for outcomes that were never in their hands to begin with. This creates a silent pressure, a feeling of carrying the weight of the future on your shoulders in the present moment. But reality is much different from what overthinking suggests. Life is not as random as the anxious mind believes, and it is not as controllable as the anxious mind assumes. There is a wisdom operating behind every situation, a system of timing, placement, and unfolding that is far beyond human calculation. What looks delayed may actually be protected. What looks unclear may actually be preparing clarity. What looks like a closed door may actually be a redirection towards something better suited, something more aligned, something more beneficial in the long run. The problem is that overthinking only sees the surface. It reacts to what is immediately visible, not what is being prepared behind the scenes. So when something does not happen quickly, the mind panics. When something feels uncertain, the mind fills the gap with fear. When something is out of reach, the mind assumes loss. But in reality, not everything that is delayed is denied, and not everything that is difficult is destructive. Some things are simply unfolding in a timing that the human heart cannot yet understand. When a person is caught in overthinking, they often feel a constant sense of urgency inside. They feel like they need to figure everything out immediately. They feel like if they do not solve it mentally, something will go wrong. This creates a cycle where the mind never rests. Even in quiet moments, Even when nothing is happening externally, the internal dialogue continues. The person is physically still but mentally exhausted. And this exhaustion does not come from action, but from continuous mental engagement with possibilities that may never even happen. What makes this even more difficult is that overthinking often disguises itself as responsibility. A person may feel like they are being careful, that they are preparing, that they are thinking ahead. But in reality, there is a difference between healthy reflection and endless mental repetition. Reflection leads to clarity and then peace. Overthinking leads to confusion and then more thinking. One has an endpoint. The other keeps extending itself without resolution. In this state, a person can begin to lose trust in the natural flow of life. They start believing that everything depends entirely on their effort, their decisions, their control. And while personal responsibility is important, absolute control is an illusion. When someone forgets this balance, they begin to carry emotional burdens that are too heavy for the human heart. They start believing that if they stop thinking, something will fall apart. But the truth is, not everything depends on constant mental pressure. Some things are already moving in the background in ways that do not require human interference. There is a deep comfort in realizing that life is not only managed by what you can see or calculate. There are unseen elements, timing, protection, and direction that operate beyond human awareness. And when a person begins to accept that not everything is their responsibility to solve immediately, something shifts inside them. The mind starts to relax. The heart starts to loosen its grip. The constant need to predict outcomes begins to reduce. This does not mean that a person stops thinking or stops planning. It simply means they stop carrying the burden of outcomes that are not in their control. They continue to act, continue to make decisions, but without the emotional weight of trying to mentally secure every possible result. And that shift alone can bring a level of peace that overthinking never allows. Because the truth is, clarity does not always come from thinking more. Sometimes clarity comes from thinking less and trusting more. When the mind is constantly crowded, it becomes difficult to see things as they are. But when the mind settles, even slightly, understanding begins to return naturally. And in that understanding, there is a softness that replaces tension. Overthinking makes the future feel like something you must solve now. But life does not unfold all at once. It unfolds step by step, and each step only becomes visible when the time for it arrives. Trying to mentally live the entire future in the present moment only creates unnecessary pressure. It is like trying to carry an entire journey in your mind before even taking the first step. When a person slowly begins to release that habit, even a little, they start to notice a change. The same situation still exists, but their emotional reaction to it becomes lighter. The same uncertainty still exists, but it no longer feels like a threat. The same unanswered questions remain, but they no longer dominate the heart. And in that space, something very important grows. A sense of trust that things are unfolding in a way that does not require constant mental struggle. Be like humans ring. There are moments in life when a person feels as if nothing is moving the way it should. Plans are delayed, answers are unclear, doors seem half open and half closed, and the heart begins to quietly wonder why things are not happening the way they were expected. In those moments, the mind often rushes ahead and starts creating meanings that are not always true. It assumes rejection where there may be protection. It assumes loss where there may be preparation. It assumes silence means absence, when in reality, silence can often mean something is being arranged in a way that is not yet visible. This is where overthinking becomes powerful, but not in a helpful way. It takes a situation that is still unfolding and tries to finalize it too early. It looks at a moment in time and treats it like the final result, even though the story is still being written. And because of that, a person starts feeling pressure that does not actually belong to the present. they begin to emotionally live in outcomes that have not even arrived yet. And that creates stress, confusion, and restlessness inside the heart. But one of the most important truths that a person slowly learns in life is that not every delay is a denial. This is something simple to say, but very deep to understand when you are in the middle of uncertainty. When something does not happen on time according to your expectation, the natural reaction is to assume something is wrong. But life does not always operate on visible timing. There is a deeper timing at work, a wisdom that is not always immediately understandable to the human mind. There are situations where what feels like a delay is actually a form of protection. At the moment, a person may not see it that way because they are focused on what they want right now. But later, when time passes and understanding increases, they may realize that what they were asking for earlier would not have been good for them at that stage of life. Sometimes the heart wants something urgently, but readiness has not yet reached that point. And so what feels like waiting is actually preparation, even if it does not feel like it in the moment. There are also times when what feels like a closed door is not actually closed forever. It may simply not be the right time to walk through it. A door can appear closed because the timing is not aligned yet. And when a person is too focused on that one door, they may miss the quiet preparation happening elsewhere. Life often redirects people in ways they do not understand immediately. And in hindsight, many people realize that what they thought was a setback was actually a shift towards something better suited for them. Overthinking in these moments makes everything heavier than it needs to be. The mind keeps asking, why is this happening? What did I do wrong? What if it never changes? And what if this is the end of the opportunity? These questions repeat in cycles, not because answers are available, but because the mind is uncomfortable with uncertainty. And when answers are not available, the mind creates its own interpretations, even if those interpretations increase fear. But what is often missed is that worry does not speed up outcomes. Anxiety does not unlock doors. Fear does not change timing. It only changes the internal experience of the person going through the situation. The external reality often continues unfolding at its own pace, regardless of how much mental pressure is applied. So a person can spend hours overthinking, yet nothing in the situation itself changes. Only their peace changes, and usually it becomes less. There is a quiet wisdom in learning that some things are not meant to be forced through constant mental struggle. Life is not a problem that can always be solved by thinking more. Sometimes thinking more actually distances a person from clarity, because clarity is not always found in more information, but in a calmer heart. When the mind is crowded with fear, it becomes difficult to see things as they are. But when the mind becomes a little quieter, understanding often returns naturally. This is why patience is not just about waiting passively. It is about trusting actively without needing to control the outcome mentally every second. It is about allowing things to unfold without constantly interfering with them through worry. It does not mean a person stops caring. It means they stop carrying what they are not meant to carry alone in their thoughts. When someone begins to understand this, even slightly, their relationship with uncertainty starts to change. Instead of seeing uncertainty as danger, they start seeing it as part of the process. Not everything is supposed to be clear immediately. Some clarity only arrives after experience, not before it. And when a person accepts that, the pressure to mentally solve everything in advance starts to reduce. There is also something very important about timing that many people overlook. Just because something has not happened yet does not mean it will never happen. Human perception is often limited to the present moment. It sees only what is in front of it now. But life moves in stages, and each stage reveals something different. What is delayed today may arrive later, in a form that is more complete, more suitable, or more beneficial than what was originally expected. Overthinking often removes this perspective. It makes a person believe that what is happening now is the final answer, when in reality, it may only be a temporary phase. And when someone forgets that life has phases, they start reacting emotionally to moments that are not final. They treat pauses as endings and delays as losses, even when they are not. This is why emotional stability is so important during uncertain times. When a person learns to remain steady, even when things are unclear, they begin to experience life differently. They are no longer constantly shaken by every delay or silence. Instead, they develop a quiet trust that things are moving even when they cannot see movement. And in that trust, something very powerful begins to happen internally. The mind becomes less reactive. The heart becomes less burdened. The constant need to analyze every detail starts to fade slightly. And in that space, a person begins to breathe mentally again, instead of constantly holding tension inside. Overthinking creates the illusion that control is being gained through mental effort. But in reality, it often creates the opposite effect. It increases emotional fatigue without changing outcomes. And over time, this can make even simple situations feel overwhelming. But when a person slowly learns to release that habit of constant mental pressure, they begin to notice that life feels less heavy, even when challenges still exist, because the situation did not change first. The inner response changed first. And that is where real ease begins to form, not in changing everything outside, but in softening what is inside. There are moments in life when a person feels stuck between hope and confusion. They are doing everything they can, making efforts, trying to be patient, trying to stay positive, yet still things are not unfolding the way they expected. In that space, the mind becomes restless. It starts asking questions that do not always have immediate answers. It begins to analyze every detail, every delay, every silence, and every outcome that has not yet arrived. And slowly, without even realizing it, the heart becomes tired from thinking too much. This is where overthinking quietly takes control. It does not come suddenly. It builds slowly. At first it feels like concern. Then it becomes analysis. Then it becomes repetition. And finally it becomes emotional weight that a person carries without even moving. They are physically present in life, but mentally they are stuck in endless loops of what if, why not, and what now. And in that state, peace becomes distant, even when nothing physically wrong is happening. But one of the most important truths in life is that not every delay means something is wrong. Not every silence means absence. And not every closed door means rejection. The human mind, when it is anxious, tends to finalize things too early. It takes a moment in time and treats it like the final result. But life is not finished in one moment. It is a continuous unfolding, and what seems unclear today may become completely understandable tomorrow. There are times when a person wants something deeply, and they believe it should happen now. They feel ready, they feel prepared, they feel like the timing is right. But what they cannot see is what is being arranged beyond their awareness. Sometimes what feels like a delay is actually a protection that they only understand later. Sometimes what feels like distance is actually preparation for something better aligned with their life. And sometimes what feels like silence is actually a process happening in the background that the mind cannot detect. Overthinking struggles with this unseen reality. It wants immediate answers. It wants clarity before movement. It wants guarantees before patience. But life does not always work in that order. Many things are only revealed through time, not through analysis. And when a person tries to mentally force clarity on something that is still unfolding, they begin to create emotional pressure that does not help the situation, only hurts their peace. There is a difference between reflection and overthinking. Reflection brings calm understanding. It helps a person see clearly, accept reality, and move forward with awareness. But overthinking does the opposite. It repeats the same thoughts without resolution. It does not bring clarity, it brings confusion. It does not bring peace, it brings exhaustion. And the person feels like they are solving something, but in reality, they are just reliving it in different forms. What makes overthinking even more difficult is that it creates a false sense of control. A person feels like if they think enough, analyze enough, and predict enough, they can somehow influence the outcome. But most outcomes in life are not shaped by mental pressure. They are shaped by timing, circumstances, wisdom, and factors far beyond one person's immediate understanding. So while the mind is busy trying to control everything, the heart becomes burdened by things it was never meant to carry. In these moments, patience is often misunderstood. People think patience means doing nothing, waiting blindly, or accepting everything without thought. But real patience is something deeper. It is the ability to remain steady while things are still unclear. It is trusting that just because you cannot see the full picture, it does not mean the picture is not being completed. It is learning to live without forcing immediate answers to every question the mind creates. There is also something very important about timing in life. Human beings often see only the present moment and assume it is the final stage. If something is not happening now, they assume it will not happen at all. But life moves in phases. What is delayed today is not necessarily denied forever. It may simply belong to a different stage of your journey. And sometimes when you look back later in life, you realize that what you were once desperate for was not suitable at that time, even if it felt necessary in the moment. Overthinking removes that long-term perspective. It compresses everything into the present moment and creates urgency where there should be patience. It makes temporary situations feel permanent. It makes uncertainty feel like failure, and it makes waiting feel like loss. But in reality, many of those moments are simply transitions, not endings. When a person begins to understand this, even slightly, something inside them starts to shift. The constant need to mentally solve everything starts to reduce. The urge to predict every outcome becomes weaker. And instead of living in imagined futures, they begin to return to the present moment, where life is actually happening. This shift does not mean challenges disappear. It means the internal reaction to challenges becomes lighter. The same situation still exists, but the emotional weight around it starts to decrease. The same uncertainty is still there, but it no longer dominates every thought. And slowly the mind begins to experience moments of silence again, instead of constant noise. In that silence, clarity often returns naturally. Not because everything is suddenly solved, but because the mind is no longer overcrowded with fear-based thinking. And when the mind becomes calmer, even small insights feel meaningful. A person starts to see that not everything requires immediate answers. Some things only need trust, time, and steady steps forward. Overthinking makes a person believe that thinking more will bring peace. But often, peace comes when thinking slows down. It comes when the heart is no longer trying to carry every possible outcome at once. It comes when a person accepts that they are not meant to control everything, only respond wisely to what is in front of them. And in that acceptance, life begins to feel less heavy. Not because everything is perfect, but because the internal struggle has reduced. The situation outside may still be unfolding, but the situation inside becomes calmer. And that inner calm is what allows a person to move forward with more strength, more clarity, and more emotional stability. So instead of letting overthinking take over every quiet moment, it becomes important to step back mentally, even slightly, and allow life to unfold without constant interference. Because not everything needs to be solved in the mind immediately. Some things simply need time to reveal their meaning. And as you continue your journey, if you find value in these reminders, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more reflections like this.